Hi, Dave. Welcome back for this bonus section of the podcast. And I thought it'd be a good idea to talk to somebody that we both look up to. Talk about somebody that we both look up to a great deal. Our squadron commander back in Operation Desert Storm, Billy Deal, because I think he is another example of servant leadership, and I'm sure that you've probably took some lessons from him along the way with everything that you've accomplished. How's that sound? Talking about Billy.
You bet.
So just for everybody who's tuning into this, General Goldfein and I were captains together in the 17th Tactical Fighter Squadron, the Hooters, that was based in Sumter, South Carolina, Shaw Air Force Base. And a few days after Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, we were on our way to the Gulf, where we were the first unit in theater. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we are first unit in theater to sit close air support alert. The first U.S. unit in theater that could stop a potential Iraqi incursion into Saudi Arabia, which was a big concern at the time. And leading the gang over there was Billy Deal, Lieutenant Colonel Billy Deal, who it was such an incredible honor to be led into what we thought was going to be immediate combat. It turned out to be combat about 6 months later, led by Billy Deal, who, like I said, it is a tremendous, transparent servant leader. You know exactly what he was thinking because he had no hidden agendas, but also he had combat time in Vietnam, and so he knew what we were heading towards. So, Dave, what are some lessons learned from Billy Deal?
Yeah, he was really the real deal. I remember going in on that first day, on that first mission, and so I was his deputy mission commander. You might remember for that first mission, and
I do remember that.
And remember, he aborted on the runway for his radios. All his radios went out.
Yep.
And so I ended up leading that whole formation, and he jumped in another airplane, and history will never reveal how much gas he actually had when he got onto the tanker, but let's just say that it was within a few hundred pounds of flaming out. He was not going to miss that mission.
Right.
And then we crossed into bad guy land. You and I, we were all green, right? None of us had been in combat. He was the only guy who'd had any combat time. And what I remember is it was like a walk in the park, for him. Remember he just pointed out, okay, AAA right 2:00, and we all stared at it. Oh my God, that's AAA. Anti-aircraft artillery, and then he says, okay, there's SA-2s left 10:00. I remember watching these telephone poles come through the formation, right? A couple of floated up above us, and then I remember, here in Splash, MiG-29. And there was a moment in my cockpit, and maybe it occurred, was the same for you. There was a moment in my cockpit when that MiG-29 hit the ground, when I realized, okay, I got this. This is not actually that new.
Yeah.
I've seen this formation. I've listened to these radio calls. I've heard these kind of things. Never seen an airplane hit the ground like that, but everything else I've actually seen at Red Flag at Nellis Air Force Base, led by our squadron commander on our last deployment, which had only been a couple months prior.
Right.
And there was this confidence that came into my cockpit that basically said, okay, I can do this. I got this combat thing. And from that point forward, there was no looking back.
Yeah.
I share that story because I call that confidence under fire.
Mm-hmm.
And Billy Deal did that for us. And I think it's the responsibility of every military leader to do that for the next generation. Mm-hmm. We want that same experience for every generation to get into their first combat mission, whether that be on the ground, at sea, under the sea. We want them to have that same moment of confidence that says, okay, I have trained hard for this, and I know this environment, and I can do this. Billy Deal did that for us, and I think it's our job to do that for others.
Yeah, and I think that extends beyond the military. I think in any challenging situation in your life, that applies. And going back to Billy's radio problem and him getting to the tanker with X amount of fuel, you can back up months earlier when we were first deploying. And I write about all. I have this new book coming out called Floating in Darkness, and I write about all this in there because there's a key point in this. And if you remember, when we headed out, we're out over the ocean. It's getting dark, and Billy decides that he's going to divert to Langley because he's got zero liters of oxygen. So it's not a good idea to head out over the ocean without any oxygen. We need that to breathe. And so he takes his wingman, Gary Cooper, and peels off towards Langley. And I'm thinking, wow, that must have been so hard of a decision for him to make. This, he's leading his boys into the unknown. We didn't even know we didn't even know where we were going. We were just told, take off, head east. We'll let you know when we know where you're going. We'll let you know. And so we're heading out into danger, into the unknown. And then a couple minutes later, we hear that Billy's rejoining the flight. That his cabin altitude is 12,000 feet, and as long as he doesn't lose his cabin pressure, then he'll be okay. As you probably remember, he did lose his cabin pressure out over the Atlantic. But the other thing is, both he and the ops group commander, Colonel Robert Van Cise, their temperature controls failed to full cold too. And I distinctly remember this. We had just flown over the Atlantic. We've all been awake for, 12, 14 hours. Who knows how long it's been. Up ahead, I see two land masses in close proximity to each other, the Straits of Gibraltar. And I'm thinking, okay, there's all these divert bases that both Billy and Colonel Van Cise can go divert to now. And I start plugging them into the computer to see what's the closest. And then as we pass, fly by a few of these, I realize that nobody's diverting today. And I thought about that, and I said, why would they do that? Why would they risk hypothermia? Billy one failure away from another, hypoxic dive at the ocean. Why would they do that? And I think in both of those guys' cases, it wasn't out of ego or a quest for glory or fame. It was simply that they felt responsible for the people that were in their charge, and they weren't going to, if it was possible, they weren't going to not be there for them and to protect them and to make sure that everything was happening exactly the way it was supposed to. And I thought that was incredible leadership at the time, and I still do, because of the motivation for it. So I think that's the critical thing in these things is why are people doing? Because there's a lot of bravery that's not real bravery. It's in some cases stupidity because of wrong reasons and wrong motivation. But in this case, I think you agree that they were starting from the right starting point.
Yeah, I'll say equally heroic to Billy Deal's work was Nancy Deal's work.
Exactly.
With our families.
Exactly.
Dawn just published, or Air University just published her companion book to the one I wrote 20 years ago, and hers is Sharing the Journey. And it's a spouse perspective on military service and serving as a senior military spouse. And she dedicated the book to Nancy Deal.
Yeah. And
throughout the years, when we've gone down to commander's courses, Dawn has told the story of Nancy and what she did for all the spouses and families during a really tough time. And she always ends with, so you have an opportunity now to be someone's Nancy.
Yeah.
And so, there's no, what a dynamic duo Billy and Nancy Deal were together to take care of our squadron during that time.
I think what I see in the success of their leadership, and I see this in your leadership too, is they were real. You could tell, everybody can see through hidden agendas and alternative plans and all this stuff. But it was very obvious with them, and I think obvious in your leadership as well, that you're doing it for the right reasons. You're doing it out of deep concern for those in your charge. You're doing it for our nation and our world. And that selfless sense of service shines through. And I think that is the most powerful leadership that I've ever been exposed to, is seeing that.
Leadership, I'm a believer that leadership is a gift, and it's offered by those who were privileged to lead. And we can never forget that. We can never forget that that we are in these positions that of leadership and responsibility, and that we have to earn that gift every day we're in the position.
Yeah.
I've got a security team. I have. My call sign is Dave. I'm retired. I'm now doing everything on my own. I love it. When I was serving as the chief, I had a security team, just wonderful young folks who took care of me, and we would often be in a hardened vehicle and heading through a city somewhere, and especially when we were here in the States, I would always quietly remind them and say, hey, I don't like the lights and the sirens, because anybody who moves out of the way on the road is my boss. And I actually need to be respectful of those I'm privileged to serve here, which are the American people that we're defending. And so shoving them to the side rails to let me make it through is actually somewhat disrespectful to those that I'm serving. So I think Billy Deal was he was such an example of servant leadership for all of us, and we all wanted to be like him. Do you remember? He was a nationally ranked weightlifter, and I've used this example over the years. So every afternoon, I remember 4:30, 5:30, whatever, he was in the gym. He'd look at us and he goes, "Hey guys, I'm going to the gym." And wasn't long before that, but they were all pumping iron. And I left that squad in best shape of my life, right? I was lifting weights all the time. Next commander came in, different commanders have different styles, different areas of focus. And so, he made an impact. And if you look at the number of folks, by the way, who went on in that group that we had to become senior leaders, general officers, commanders, it was almost unprecedented.
Yeah.
I'm also a believer that the only real legacy we leave behind that matters are those we raised to replace us. Yeah. And Billy raised a whole bunch of great folks who went on to replace him and rise up to the highest levels of our Air Force.
In my book, part of my character description of Billy was he looks like he could bench press a Cadillac.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah, that was a really pivotal time, I think, and it shaped a lot of careers, and it shaped the course of the world at that time. Yeah. So, what year did you go through weapons school?
I was. Let's see. I think I was 95. Yep. So it would have been after we came back from the desert. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I remember a couple of great stories. One particular one I loved. I remember me and Zot going out to Zot Dennis to fly, and it was you and Rev Jones as our IPs. I don't know if you remember that one. We went like 11-0, and you guys almost busted us.
For those that don't know what the weapons school is basically it's the Air Force Top Gun school, and so the best of the best go there, and they are expected to go back to become the warfighting experts that go back to their squadrons and make sure that their squadrons are combat ready and employing the right tactics. And so I had the great privilege of being an instructor there for 3 years. And in my 3 years there, I went to 5 memorial services. And so, a lot of people don't understand that the commitment and the sacrifice of military personnel is 24/7, and it's regardless of whether we're in peacetime or wartime. And so, some say it's the most dangerous flying outside of combat. Others people say it's the most dangerous flying, including combat. So it is an incredible program that General Goldfein has been through. So, but it transitioned from being the fighter weapons school to the weapons school, which initially it was just fighter aircraft, and then it started bringing in all the different platforms and aircraft and everything else. And I think it's doing a great service to the country and to the U.S. military.
Mm-hmm. Amen. No, one of the highlights, people, I remember one particular ride, I think it was my Tactical Intercept XX ride. So what that means for the listeners is it was the ride that we had to determine whether I was going to be kicked out of the program or not. And I remember coming up initial and looking at my ejection handle thinking, what would be worse, the debrief with Garan or the accident board?
Yeah, no, those were interesting times. Let's go back and just touch on a little bit more about Billy Deal, because I think there's so much more to learn from him, especially during that time when we were overseas. Lots of things to deal with, loss, trying to get ready for the big missions. I'll give you a couple other examples. I remember when the ceasefire came through. Carmel, my wife, was pregnant, as was my wingman, Mark Nichols, and I remember Billy pulling me aside and Nick aside and basically saying, "You guys need to be on the first cargo plane out of here. We don't know how long the ceasefire is going to last, and I want you guys to be home with your wives for the birth of your children." So those are the kind of things that he would do.
Yes. Do you remember? Were you around for Hurricane Hugo?
Yes.
So I remember I was a relatively new wingman.
Is this where we went to Seymour Johnson?
We went to was it Seymour or was it Tinker or Wright Pat? Then we went to Wright Pat.
Okay.
Maybe it's anyway. I remember walking out to the airplane, and I was on Billy Deal's wing that day, and I just didn't like the idea of leaving Dawn pregnant with a young toddler at home. And Billy could tell something was going on, so he walked over and he says, "Hey, what's going on?" I said, "Hey, sir, I just do not do this one. I don't like leaving my family, to go race off and save an airplane and leave them." And he said, "Hey, let me tell you something." He put his arm around me. He goes, "Let me tell you something." He goes, "Nancy and I, we've been through Huravacs, Himavacs, Typhoonavacs, you name the vac, we've been through it. Here's what happens. All the families get together, the kids get together, the kids have a great time, families have a great time, we're on the road, we have a great time, it's just a great time." And so I looked at it and said, "Well, I hadn't thought about it that way. Okay, well, let's go." And of course, then the eye of the storm came right through Sumter, South Carolina. Right. And of course, every challenge and opportunity, Billy jumped in and led us through that. You may remember that we were, cutting people out of their, with trees all over their homes and everything. And then we formed up teams, and, it was just, it turned out to be a very positive experience again, because we did it as one team under a great leader.
So one of the things that I think I've learned through my experience with the military, and particularly, and if there was a time, it was probably the time in the 17th where this really came about, is I think I received my life calling during that time period. And it's taken me 3 decades to figure that out. But what I think I learned that is the value of the camaraderie of coming together as your team, your tribe, your family, whatever you want to call it. And we weren't just fighting for our country; we were fighting for each other, right? And that feeling, I think, sparked something in me where my life calling and my mission was to try and explore the possibilities of a continuously expanding tribe. And so there are, a lot of people use tribalism as in a negative way, but there's some positive aspects of tribalism. It just depends on how you define your tribe. And, we live in a very tribal world right now, and that causes folks like us to have a job in the military, right? When we were in the military. It would be nice to live in a world where that wasn't a requirement. But obviously that's not the world that we live in. But we can set ourselves on a path to get there, though, if we have this mindset of a continuously expanding tribe. And then eventually the tribe would become a tribe of earthlings, which wouldn't just be humans. I mean, it would be all living things on the planet is the tribe. And so throughout your 4 decades in the military, is there anything that you can speak to about the camaraderie of being in a squadron, of being in a fighting unit, and how that can apply to society overall?
When I would get together with airmen at all calls as chief, I would ask them, hey, how many of you are, part-time work in Air Force and full-time work in civilian work? Our wonderful, courageous Air National Guardsmen primarily. And always the number of hands would go up. And I'd ask, that's all right. So how many of those, so think about your civilian employer. How many of your employers call your family when you're on a trip for them to check in and see how the family's doing? And of course, they all would, mostly, a couple times, they do, but vast majority, 98% of the time was, well, they never do that. So how many of them would, like your, office workers or co-workers, whatever, would just drive by and check on your spouse and the family, make sure the lawn's mowed and things are taken care of and no pipes are broken? I mean, how many would actually take the time to do some of that? And of course the answer was, well, I'd never do. I said, that's true. It's not because those are, that they're evil or bad. It's culture. That's not the culture of most civilian organizations. That's our culture. That's what that culture of taking care of each other, of being a family, beyond an immediate family, is part of what the Air Force is all about. It always has been that way. I hope it will be that way. And it defines us. It defines our soul as an organization.
Mm-hmm.
So I hope that we never lose that, as we go forward, that sense of belonging, that sense of being inclusive, that sense of being a valued member of this team, not only the military member, but equally important, the spouse and the family. I grew up as a military brat. My dad was Air Force. I remember, going to the squadron as a kid and playing with the chalk. The only thing that changed is that my kids grew up playing with whiteboards.
Yeah.
But it's the same sense of family that we have across the Air Force. That's just so important.
Yeah. So speaking of family, we've got a lot of people that are hurting right now, and we have all these crises going on. We've got obviously the pandemic. We've got deep divisions in our country politically. We have political gridlock. We have racial unrest. We have global warming. We have all these wildfires and extreme weather. All of these things. Obviously there's a lot of economic hardship right now. We're coming to the end of this bonus section. Is there anything that you can offer folks as a sign of hope you've navigated so many big crises in your life and things that would overwhelm most people. What kind of advice can you give people right now that they can use to deal with these crises that are swirling all around us?
Well, I'd say maybe a couple things. First of all, this is a time where I worried a little bit, actually a lot of it, as the chief, that we were at times unintentionally incentivizing loneliness in a variety of ways. Mm-hmm. And that the younger generation, and oh, by the way, I'm not one who criticizes any generation. This young generation of young men and women who join are just as patriotic as every other one, just as smart, just as talented, but just to they've had a different life experiences as a digital generation that have grown up with so much of the social media. So as we deal with these issues, I'd say first and foremost, we got to make sure that we don't lose our sense of community and that we don't lose our sense of family as we work our way through them. And then, the second I would say is I've always believed that not only does every challenge in life present an opportunity, but, there are certain things in life you can control, and there's a number of things you just can't. And this place to spend our time is on those areas that we can actually control. And the ones that what areas we just have absolutely no control over, boy, we can spend a lot of time worrying about them.
Exactly.
But I'm not sure that we can do that much about them.
Exactly.
And so I've tried to always focus on those things I can maintain some control over and actually affect in a positive way. And then always do so in a way that's, brings some semblance of humility to the table, because the challenges we face are wicked, they're complex, and they require all of us shoulder to the wheel, I think, to overcome them. But not one, you mentioned, is not able to be overcome.
Right. There's strength and unity, our shared strength. And I you brought up a really, really good point about not worrying about stuff we don't have control over, because when we do, which is the natural way to deal with things, is to worry about everything. But when we put undue focus on the things that we don't have control over, it inhibits our ability to affect the things that we do have control over. We're using a bandwidth up that is being wasted.